Welcome, Jennifer. This is the Global
Thank you.
Digest think tank. How can you say yourself, please?
My many 20 over years as a HR, last 10 years as a leader, HR leader in a company, solar renewable energy and oil and gas in the maritime sector, that spans across more than 10 countries. Certainly, understanding and connecting the dots between HR and business is important because everything that HR does has to be very sharp and intentional to drive the performance. In terms of the politics of that, of course, what I know is only very, very big. I would not know the in-depth like perhaps most of you guys would know. But I know enough in terms of how it drives certain trends and what kind of market landscape that is evolving that helps me to more accurately initiate and drive HR works that will directly or indirectly influence and impact the outcome, the performance of the company business, right? So if you're asking me to talk about politics or economy or whatsoever, quite honestly, that is not within my field, and quite honestly, not one of my interest subjects. But I know enough in terms of in a very, very blanket definitions of how it works and how it influences business and how the business and HR drive each other. That is the extent of what I know. But as of now, I've left the corporate organization, corporate environment, and I'm actually pretty much on my own. In Singapore, I'm Singaporean, obviously. In Singapore, operating as what you call a fractional HR as an advisor to companies as well as a coach. So, I mean, my learners comes in all forms as well. Leaders in Singapore, mainly the leaders, whether is it in Singapore or across other countries, across geography. So
Singapore is survived because of political economy, geopolitical economy, based on political economy because they don't have any resources, any natural resources, even very small territory. My interest is real estate. So in your experience, HR, human resource, how can you classify
about, in terms of HR and business, how it translate in different cultures. Correct me if I'm wrong, if that is the question you're asking. For the last 10 years, since 2016 until now. So two different industry for about 4.5, 5 years each. So the first was solar renewable energy, mainly Southeast Asia. And this Gulf Marine, which is the most recent, 4.5, 5 years in probably more than 10, 12 countries worldwide. So I think in total, I probably cover about 15 odd countries so far, from US to North America, South America, to Europe, to Middle East, to India, to Asia. Right. So if I were to answer that questions, based on the experience, there is no blanket playbook. Whatever works for one country will never work on another. So if a businessman decides that, hey, I want to, build my business in Vietnam or Myanmar or Thailand or Germany, whatever, if they think that it works fantastically in Singapore and every Asia country should be the same, they will fail. Because you and I know that even within Asia itself, the context is quite different. The practice, the understanding, the perspective, the beliefs, the values are all very different. So it's the same thing that you also, what I actually understand based on experience when I was working in the last two companies, Gulf Marine and Sunseap. So in order to optimize and really expand and augment the talents you have in different countries to bring all together to drive that the company outcomes, that the business outcomes that is needed. One of the most important is skill set is very easily developed and grown, but for who wants to build the business, they need to understand, accept, embrace the traits that is defined by the cultural nuances because they are embedded into everyone since we are born. And understand with the difference to incorporate the understanding of the different nuance to tailor how they want to develop and groom their talents so that talents understand that what they can actually accomplish together and bringing them together as a whole group with the diverse cultures. It requires that kind of mindset, understanding various cultures, embrace them, and tailor the approach to managing each different culture as well as to groom and build these talents as well as bringing them together. So be it developing, be it communicating, be it leading, be it even simple things like delegation, it has to be based on the cultural differences. That is the way to go forward. And that is what I've been doing in the last 10 years, which I'm very thankful. I had very good support from my CEO, my C-suite. I'm a C-1, so including my leaders as well. They were very supportive. I was very fortunate on that. And I got the stakeholders support and buy-in as well, including even like staff and most of the senior management. So, from initiating communications with every different groups of various groups of employees from ground level all the way to the senior management to developing coaching techniques, guiding the leaders how to coach and teach their team members, investing in really understanding our cultural nuances, all the programs when it comes to employee engagement experience is all tailored. And I had a lot of support in order to actually accomplish what I've done. So in that sense, I was very lucky that I had all very good support system from my leaders all the way to staff. Number two, I knew that from my diagnostic what is necessary to implement to work, and I'm glad that whatever I've implemented and created has worked very well.
I see. I mean, it's fair enough. You have a lot of experience from various countries, so many cases from many background, many contexts, cultural context. Especially you mentioned about business culture and holistic employee experience, as you mentioned in your profile. Those employees should be as holistic employee.
Let's start with Singapore because the last two companies like Sunseap and Gulf Marine HQ is in Singapore itself. So when it comes about holistic, again, remember when we talk about various cultures, there's no singular standard playbook. Diagnostic is always need to be done. So every playbook for each country is different. The communication, the management, all that, people are also different. So if you talk about someone new coming to Singapore, say someone who is from another country coming here, Singapore, we're technically very cosmopolitan. We're certainly very advanced. Our education and our value belief, entrenched into us when we were from childhood has always been, you must always excel in school, you must do the best, you must, be somebody great. And it's a very ambitious, very, very or goal-driven society. And it tends to be very fast-paced. But that to say, right, although we have, we are a nation where we have a balance between, a family and personal life to career, but performance is one of the biggest driver in any organizations. And generally, a lot of employers in Singapore, they value they put a lot of focus on performance. And in that sense, because we are also a rather high cost country, human labor tends to be expensive. So most of the time, employees try to do more with less. So, long hours over time just to perform and accomplish outcomes is not exactly uncommon. But that to say, I would say that the context here is that anyone could easily have access to quality training. People still are very, very team driven. They still believe that, hey, no matter how busy we are, you're one of us. We will always be there for you. We will always be there to help you. So that team-oriented spirit always lives within this culture itself, despite being a very goal-oriented and performance-driven culture, where people tend to spend probably 75% of their life working. But everything else, we still believe there's a balance, that even we work hard, we still believe in playing hard. So let's just say that standards here is probably quite demanding, not always something for, if let's say, you're someone who has a very different value where it's, for me, I just want just a job. I don't want a lot of stress, all that. It might present some challenges to such a person, because this type of person would be a struggle for this person who just want to take this as a normal job and just live the life very simply. It could get a bit tricky and challenging, especially in the context where I think Singapore is also very fast, rapidly adapting AI into this context as well. Digitalization, AI is getting very prevalent. So, people who have to survive have to be ahead of time, understanding how to build the individual unique selling point, shall we say. So moving that forward to maybe some other countries itself, when I talk about holistic well-being, John, it means that Singapore has its own playbook. Maybe I've done Hong Kong, I've done Korea, I've done Vietnam, I've done Thailand. Each of them have their own different playbook. I think for Koreans, what I notice is, okay, as a playbook, right, how to bring them a holistic is in their own values and their own belief system, their own culture. In Korea, the power distance tends to be very high. In fact, probably higher than Singapore, if I recall, if I'm not incorrect. They still believe, they still have a firm belief that hierarchy needs to be respected. You don't question hierarchy. You don't challenge, because you may suffer repercussion or retribution after. Apparently, there's still the practice in a lot of organizations and a lot of employers there, from what I understand. And people tend to, the definition of a very excellent employee is one who works really hard, who puts in all the effort, the hours, and shall we say, pretty much just comply with what's necessary. However, there are those who, I mean, in my team back then, there are those who really, when they are given the opportunity, because I created the space for them to open up and innovate, right? They are like unleashed, they can come up with fantastic perceptions of how to run the business, how to deal with, different stakeholders in Korea and elsewhere. So I think it's a case of the culture dictates as such that, based on my experience, John, I may be very wrong. The culture seems to dictate as such that they just follow what they are being given without question. They do well, they work very hard.
Right.
But I think given the right opportunity, if the space is given to them, they can definitely do more than just doing the job. They can definitely, they are very good at giving concepts. They're good at developing very interesting ideas that can actually value add to the business.
You want to say now they are a little bit they have a freedom democracy, but they still not finish those oppressive behavior or labor excessive than normal business culture, normal business culture.
Okay, let's draw a comparison between Singapore and Korea. I think probably might be a bit easier. In Singapore Asia is Asia in general. Let's look at the blanket cover, okay? in Asia, we are still, regardless of countries, Asia culture still dictates that power distance is relatively high. We're supposed to be told what we're expected to be told what to do. We'll do what is we are told. And technically, no question asked, no expression of concerns because of challenges, because of fear of pushback. Okay, so this is a very blanket culture or Asia. Now, let's look more granular. In Singapore itself, from other countries like Singapore itself, I guess being probably in itself, it has evolved to a case where that typical Asian culture of being told what to do, taking instruction and do as we are told, it still exists. However, in many organizations, most of us employees, many of us have evolved to, we don't mind sharing our thoughts, we don't mind sharing our perspective. We're very open. Not all employers are receptive still. There are employers, however, are receptive. So it's actually evolving, this culture of being more open, more receptive between leaders and employees, and closing and narrowing the gap on the power distance, I would say, if that answers your question. Now, put the analogy comparison to Korea. Let's take Seoul, for example. I think Seoul itself, based on what I've observed, I don't know Seoul very well. I don't know Korea well, but like I said, my experience with my Korean team for the last 4-5 years is that I think in general they are still, I wouldn't use the word oppressed, but I think it's just a certain cultural values that has been entrenched since they were children. I think it's the same for all Koreans there, right? We're supposed to listen to our parents. We're supposed to obey our teachers, obey our bosses. We're supposed to told us we told what to do. We're supposed to do what we are told. So that value still stands. However, given what I've seen, how Koreans have evolved in terms of, I mean, even in the aspect of, interesting innovations like the drama, the music, the band, the colors, the fashion, everything else is actually showing, in my perspective, that Korea is evolving a lot in that aspect. And the only way that is able to evolve so quickly is, while there's still the old values existing within the employers, but people are starting, as they become more educated, they are also, they have access to media, they watch TVs, a lot influence from the other cultures, the Western cultures especially. It has sort of opened their mind, right? Especially with I would say the millennials onwards and younger, and they're starting to open up to understand, hey, there's a lot more than just a Korean culture. There's a lot more they can do and enhance themselves as Korean beyond just a usual culture, which has value add to the economy of Korea, if I may say. You talk about the boy band, the girl band, the music, the fashion, the makeup, the what you call it, the TVs and all. I think they have actually, the expansion in their mind and their embrace of new dimensions within that defines a Korean culture has actually added a lot of benefits to the economy of Korea, if I may say. I might be very mistaken on this. And I think in that sense, it also means that in the business world, I think that, and companies are starting to open up more to enable people to think, enable people to express, to explore, to experiment. And I think in that and in that way, if I may be very honest as a Singaporean, Koreans being so innovative came up with very, very pragmatic ideas that actually drive the economy through a successful business is probably a lot more successful than what we can do in Singapore.
So, I mean, Korea economic growth successful, probably they have a lot of cheap labor and also a lot of unpaid intellectual knowledge. So you want to say that's also contributed for Korea economy, or I don't know in Singapore case, Singapore don't practice like that. but Singapore also grow in economy.
Because if I may be honest, right, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Koreans' employment laws protect employees way better than Singapore. Singapore is one of the few countries where the employment laws actually protect employers,
I see.
not so much for employees. However, we have laws on top of the typical employment law. We
So
also have other subset of laws. For
Singapore is
example,
worse
you
than
want to hire, employer want to hire in,
Singapore is worse than Korea.
yes, in terms of labor law. You see, in Singapore itself, generally the law, I will call it fairly balanced, okay? Korean, I'm aware that the laws actually protect employees. However, if I may be very honest, the employment laws in Korea is not robust enough. It only covers certain areas, but doesn't cover everything. I
Right.
think that is probably one of the challenges you all face where, oh, I hire interns, I don't pay them, I steal their ideas. In Singapore, we have subset of laws. Our laws protect both employers and employees, but I would say more often is employers actually are the one protected. Employees is a very balanced case, but not much compared to Korea and other countries. Now, there are subset laws, like for example, if an employer want to hire an intern, we must pay. We cannot don't pay, and there's a minimum. And we must pay. And if let's say they want to take ideas, all that, the employees have the right to protect their ideas also. So I'm not sure how the employees in Korea does, but if I may add on maybe an additional feedback on the employment laws in Korea, it needs to be robust enough so that it can protect all the way to interns. That interns are not going in for free. They at least should have a minimum fee, something like that,
Right.
because they are also putting work. They are not free laborers.
Right. It's more about structure violence, structure problem.